She keeps us posted on all things in the animal kingdom. She is Karen Dawn, the editor and creator of Dawnwatch. Hi, Karen.
Hello, hello.
Oh,
Nice
you're
I'll have to tune in tomorrow.
Look at you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm taking advantage of at least one decent day of weather in Austin.
All right. Well, we love having you here. You have a
Yeah.
story that, like many animal stories, has gotten a little bit of oxygen, media oxygen, right? I wonder if you could share it with us.
Yep, absolutely. It broke originally in the San Diego Tribune when some activists in Arizona who were supposed to be acquiring some small animals, which is guinea pigs, rabbits, rats, mice generally, who were supposed to be coming in from the San Diego Humane Society to the Humane Society of Southern Arizona. Those animals couldn't be located anywhere. And a little follow-up, and they found that the animals had been transferred to some reptile breeders, and it was looking as if they had been used as reptile feed, either frozen or, and that's the story there, either frozen or fed live. And this first hit the San Diego Union Tribune, and then it certainly got some legs on the internet, and it appeared in yesterday's New York Times. So I thought I'd bring it to everybody's attention today. It's an interesting story in that, on first glance, it's pretty distressing to think that here were these 250 animals who were at the Humane Society hoping to be saved, and that they ended up as reptile feed. I had a letter published about this in the San Diego Union Tribune, which I've sent you guys along, and I'd love you, Mark, if you read it, it'll sound much better than if anybody else reads it. It'll have all that power, so I'll let you read out what I had to say about this.
All right.
You don't mind?
I will be happy to do that. Let me just get it for you here. Because I had the Times piece.
You had the article up. Sorry.
Yeah. No, hang on a second. Oh, now and you've sent a couple of. Oh, I see it. Okay, now this way. So this is from Karen. She wrote this to the editor, and missing pets should make people think. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. Here it is.
Yeah.
Everybody can read along with me. Hundreds of Humane Society pets ended up with men linked to a reptile breeder. Now animal advocates want accountability. And now here's what you wrote. The sorrowful fate of the small animals who were transferred from the San Diego Humane Society to Arizona and apparently ended up as reptile food should be food for thought for anybody who thinks it might be cool to have a pet snake. Not only does that choice deprive the snake of any kind of decent life, it deprives hundreds or even thousands of other sentient beings of their lives. Yeah.
That was my thinking on it. And I'm interested in knowing how, people who look at the animal world not quite as I do look at this, because this is what I found interesting. Of course, it's sad that all these little animals ended up as snake food mostly. But why is that worse than any other little animals ending up as snake food? I don't personally really get it. I sort of understand, that it hits people differently, but is it really any different? And is it worse? And I would suggest maybe not. And I'm interested in what other people think on this. And I just wonder if when it is little animals who came from the Humane Society who ended up as snake food, if that might wake people up a little bit to this whole idea of raising animals whose whole purpose on life is to be food for pets who probably would rather not live their lives in cages either. So I think, perhaps the whole industry sucks. And it's one thing for me to say that, but another for me to notice that when this story hits the news, people are really, really interested, and people are really, really outraged that these animals ended up as reptile food. So what is that about? And I'm interested in your take on that too, Mark.
That's actually really provocative. As usual, you sort of come down in a way that is thought-provoking, meaning one could say, well, that's terrible. I mean, you bring these animals to a shelter, you don't expect them to be ground up to be made food. I mean, it really is. It is, and yet you appropriately point out, well, I mean, how is that any worse than the animals that are raised for food being ground up for food? Here's why it's a bit worse, because when I rescue a cat or a dog from the street and I bring it to any kind of shelter, city run, county run, whatever, shelter, the word shelter in itself connotes that something better is going to happen than that animal being loose on the street and having to forage for food or whatever it might be, and being subjected to the cruelty that humans inflict on these wild creatures, or just feral cats or wild dogs, whatever it might be, or just, unhomed creatures. I mean, they may have gotten out and they've lost their way or whatever it might be. So because we've taken them to a, quote, shelter, the implication is that there will be a better fate awaiting them. Then we learn that, actually, we're going to kill them all, grind them up, and they're going to be reptile food. Well, that's disgusting. I never would bring that puppy or dog or whatever, that creature that needs my help. I would never bring that creature to other people who are charged with also helping, so that on down that chain of people helping will be some kind of new place for that creature to thrive and do well. That's all implied when you talk about a shelter. And so I find it objectionable, and yet interesting, the point you're making, the notion that, well, they kind of end up, how is that worse? The how is that worse argument, I think, can be, it can be weaponized a little bit, and I feel as though it's a little weaponized in this case.
Interesting. I would agree with you totally that, and of course I get it, that people are more upset because it's the wrong thing to do to the people who have brought the animals to the shelter. But I also would just want to throw out the idea that those animals who the people have brought to the shelter don't really suffer anymore and don't matter anymore than those other animals who were going to be the food for those reptiles.
Oh, of course that's true. Of course that's true.
Yeah. And so when you say, it's funny that you use the word weaponized, because weaponized has negative connotations.
Of course,
Whereas
that's why I used it.
Okay, yeah. And I would suggest that perhaps it is provocative rather than weaponized in that, in the way I'm using it, that I would like people who think that this is so terrible, as I wrote in that letter, to think a little bit about the whole idea of having pet animals who eat other animals.
Look, I love that point you're making, and that's so provocative and so interesting. I think that's one of the reasons that you are interesting in this world of animal rights. I mean, you make the point that you made. But if I told you, we had the dog for 10 years and then we just donated to this place where they grind them up and make them food, you'd be okay with that? Not you, Karen Dawn, but one would be okay hearing that story. I mean, but then I'd said, well, honestly, how is it any worse than when we gave them 10 years, and how is it any worse than the animals who are raised for food? They're all ending up in the same place. The how is it any worse argument, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. Provocative, interesting, but when I talk about weaponized, I'd suggest that that's weaponized in that case. It's justifying unacceptable behavior. It's justifying an immorality that I'm not good with. Even as I say it, I have to recalibrate and think about what you said, because I think it truly is provocative and interesting, but it just goes against the way I'm wired, I guess. I find it so repugnant, and repugnant is a dim word.
It goes against the way that everybody's wired, but I think it's time for us to look at our wiring. And I'm not saying, of course, it's fine that these animals ended up in the snakes' mouths. I'm suggesting that no animals bred by humans should end up in the mouths of animals bred by humans.
Really good stuff. I mean, I understand you're not condoning it, but you do offer a real interesting take on it. So, do we have something happy, Karen? I like you to end on something happy.
Do.
You don't have anything? Okay. Thank you.
We certainly do. I wanted to share with you a few weeks ago, we spoke about an orca named Luna who came to a very sad end because this orca never had a pod who they fit in with for whatever reason and was always trying to be around humans and eventually got killed after, the humans banned the orca from people from talking to the orca. It was a mess. And you thought you were surprised to hear that I thought that particular orca would have been better off at SeaWorld, which is like, how could an animal rights person say that? So this orca, who I think Tony has video of, clearly also never found an orca pod he fit in with. And perhaps he was a vegetarian orca, who knows, or a pescatarian orca. But unlike the other orca who had no friends except humans, this particular orca, who people call Old Tom, has joined up with a bunch of dolphins. And we have video, which we can.
It's a nice vision of the orca hanging out with dolphin
And it
friends.
just reminds us that all of these animals are individuals, whether it be the little mice or here we go.
There it
We're
is.
going to see him hanging out with.
That's great.
I love his big body coming up in the midst of all the dolphins in there. So that's how he got around not having an orca pod to fit in with.
Wow, really something. And it's really, we're evolving to a better place with all these animals, and hopefully, they're so social and well developed and cognitively aware, and it's just these sea creatures are far more sentient, than given credit. Anyway, Karen, great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing the good and the not so good. And we'll look forward to talking to you next week. And we'll remind everybody, Dawnwatch is available, certainly dawnwatch.com, but also you have a Facebook following, I know, that's pretty robust. So you can find, if you're on Facebook, Karen at Dawnwatch on Facebook. Good stuff. Thanks, Karen. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.